Don't settle for fakes. My duel-taining is the real deal.
Hey everyone, it's mekklord. The KC Cup has just started, and you might be wondering, mekklord, tell me, what is the best deck to climb the KC Cup with? It's Destiny Heroes, but in case you wanted to play some other decks, I've decided to make this little tier list that I sometimes do, featuring 20 decks, all in alphabetical order, because I'm just clean like this. A quick recap of how the categories work. Tier 1, obviously the best decks that are gonna be the easiest to climb with in stage 1 and stage 2. So if you wanna score some points or just get to dual level max as soon as possible, you go for these decks. Tier 2 decks are good, you know, tier 2 decks are pretty good, but they present a bit more of a challenge than tier 1 decks. Maybe they don't have a good matchup in some scenarios. Maybe it's just missing that special oomph, you know, that makes the tier 1 decks really good and special and powerful. Tier 3 decks these decks are a bit less good. These decks are a bit less good, let's be honest between us. You know, we're friends. You and I can be honest, these decks not as good. But sometimes they have good matchups against, you know, the top decks, or they have a special thing that makes them really good in that exact scenario that is the KC Cup. And rogue decks is basically decks that you can expect to show up every now and then, but they're not so impressive, and if you're playing them, you're not gonna get too many wins against tier 1 or tier 2, but you might scoff at some win against tier 3, and occasionally you get a win or two over tier 2, and you're like, "Wow, that was completely worth it." With that out of the way, let's start making this list with the very first deck in there, Armored Dragon. So Armored Dragon, I've cogged with this deck, right? It's not it's not good at all. Armored Dragon, I think, is what, like, the definition of a rogue deck could be. You know, it's a deck that has a very linear but explosive game plan. You aim to make Armored Dragon Thunder level 10 on your first turn with its effect to be able to search a Dark Armored Dragon on the following turn. Well, not directly, you're pitching Armored Dragon level 7, you know, whatever. You don't play this deck, you don't know. And this deck has decent OTK capabilities, especially if you open Dad going second, or Armored Dragon white, the white one. But it's like incredibly linear. It has some very identifiable choke points, which are called exactly the normal summon, or the Dark Armored Dragon if you happen to have multiple back row, which a couple of decks do in this era of Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links. It's a quick deck that can rack up quick wins, but also it really doesn't have a good matchup against most of the better decks out there. Burning Abyss, also I think a rogue deck. I don't know if I'd say it's better or worse than I'm gonna put it behind Armored Dragon for one very specific reason. Abyss Dweller is still a card that a lot of people will go into because it's still so good against so many decks, right? It's really good against Gimmick Puppets, it's really good against Orcust, it's really good against infinitracks, it's really good against Tenyi, it's really good against salamangreat. So if you're gonna be playing the KC Cup, there's a huge chance that someone came prepared with Dweller in the extra specifically to deal with these cards that also happen to cripple your entire deck. Burning Abyss, one of the longest lasting decks in the history of Yu-Gi-Oh! In general, TBH. This deck has been around forever, but it's not gonna win the KC Cup, that's for sure. Crusadia is a deck that took people by surprise in the last KC Cup. It's really, you know, competent at establishing a board. Give me a bit of a bitch to break turn 1, but more specifically OTKing as soon as they get a battle phase. I think it's one of these tier 2 decks. Hand of tier 1, higher hand of tier 2, in my opinion. Like, this deck is really good at killing you dead, and this is what it's going to do over and over, but there are cases where, well, you don't get to go second, right? You have to go first, and then your board is a bit less threatening than some other boards. Or you go second, but your opponent has, like, been playing Destiny Heroes with Dystopia and 3 back rows, so it's like, you can't always navigate these really difficult boards, you know? It's still a very strong deck that I expect to see perform well. But it's not like one of the best decks, it's just one of the best decks, not one of the best. Speaking of the best, Destiny Heroes over there. It's a deck that has an insane skill that generates a lot of advantage for the deck. It's a deck that is able to just play a bunch of back row and call it a day. It is a deck that somehow people on Reddit haven't been complaining about all that much. which is surprising, because Duel Links Meta said this was the best deck for several weeks in a row, and people are like still complaining about orcust. But yeah, this deck is like exceptionally good. A lot of people have been railroaded into trying different ways to play the deck early on, like, you know, Beatrice with tackle crusadia, because malicious is a 6th and dangerous. You can make it really easily with skill. The sunrise kind of package that allows you to OTK really quickly. I think this deck is best played, I don't say pure, you know, without the liquid soldier, without the tackle crusader that's gonna end up in your opening hand anyway, but that's not a problem because you can pitch it for dangerous, whatever. The way I've been enjoying this deck the most is as a link spam kind of deck, considering that any Destiny hero is basically a link 2, and Drill Dark plus any other hero in hand is basically an instant link 3, which is like pretty insane. This allows you to go into Nightmare Phoenix or Griffin into Unicorn to clear out potential threats before setting up your dystopia, which I think is pretty good. And if you're like going first, you can just make dystopia and set a bunch of back row, or make dystopia and rank 4 and set a bunch of back row, which all of these are pretty good options, right? It's definitely one of the strongest decks of the game at the moment. Gimmick Puppet, a deck that has been putting a bit of results as of late, because it has access to the Gengetsu now. Still don't think this is... maybe it's better. I think it's better than BA. I don't know if it's better than Armed Dragons, because it lacks that simple you know? Yeah, I'm gonna put it there for now. I'll see if I change my mind. Gimmick Puppets, it's an Xyz deck. And going first, it makes the Gengetsu exactly, and the link... what's it called? The link 2 that basically searches your card every turn, so it aims to like win by advantage, is able to dig through its deck with cards like Advanced Draw. It is able to leverage some disruption like Barrage Blast, which is pretty decent. And then it OTKs. But it doesn't OTK as well as Crusadia, and it does it setups and one as well as like most of the other decks on this list. So it's like, it's decent. It's a decent deck. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a couple of like Gimmick Puppet lists on the top 100, because it's a fan favorite for good reason. I think it's a cool deck. I wouldn't put my money on it winning the KCC. infinitrack, I think it's one of these tier 3 decks that people love exploring and love playing with. The one thing that it has going against it in the context of the KC Cup is that games where you play infinitrack tend to be rather long, because you have a really long turn 1 setup combo that is basically destined to just draw you 2 cards, right? It's a deep draw deck where you have to do a million things just to be able to draw into some tech and back row to make your opponent's life miserable. It's a cool deck, but the games are gonna be slow and sluggish. Even though you are able to OTK rather easily, there's still that turn 1 conundrum that's gonna hold you back. That was the fact that, well, as with every combo deck, you have some very clear choke points that people are going to be able to use and abuse against you. Like warning point on Brutal Dozer, that's the end of the game. Nekroz, I think is my least favorite deck that I've put here, so I'm gonna put it in Rogue, because fuck Nekroz. Actually, it's probably better than BA. What can I say about Nekroz, you know? It's one of these decks that won't die. It's another one of these decks that people will play. Recently got Klausalas and Preparation of Rites, and it's still doing the same things that aren't nearly as good, because there are more decks that don't rely on the extra deck in order to make, you know, interesting plays, or that end with no cards in hand. So Nekroz of like Trishula hits the field, I was like, well, I can't banish anything. It's still like a potent engine, and a deck with a rather high scale cap, which is also a thing going against it. It's not an ideal deck to climb, I think. Pure Odd Eyes, getting into the really heinous shit, I think it's there, right? Pure Odd Eyes, it's clearly one of the best decks. Like, even if you don't play it with any other additional engine or whatever, this deck is still just able to set Shooting Riser into Trish 0, or any combination of rank 4s, or some other shit turn 1, and then on turn 2 it's just OTKs, because this deck was designed with no restraint, and the skill is completely carrying it. I really can't wait until this is over and just gets nerfed. Raging Pendulum just gets obliterated, and we can move on to enjoying some cooler decks. Allies Magistus. You know what? Allies Magistus, I think, is right there. Basically doing the same shooting rifle setup, but also you have a snatch steal. And you get to draw a bit into your deck. Because Endymion, that's basically it. It's still a really good deck. It's one of these combo decks that it takes less time to set up than infinitrack, because you just have to click yes on the scale, and then voila, that's your combo. You really want this scale to get nerfed. Now there's Orcust, also a variant that is really popular despite Konami's attempt at nerfing it last KCC. Remember when they put Pentcold and Harpora to 3 and they were like, nobody's ever gonna play Raging Pendulum Orcust ever again? Just scale the scale, Konami. But this variant has over the other two, and it's playing Orcust, which means it has access to all field protection and non-targeting, non-destruction removal, which is, I've been told, is pretty good. But also, it's a bit less consistent than the other two. It's like a more explosive kind of variant. Just a tiny wee bit less consistent, because at the end of the day you're still playing Raging Pendulum, so the deck is already shitting consistency out the ass. Pure Orcust. Pure Orcust is there. I don't care what anyone else says, Pure Orcust is still a very potent deck, a very capable deck, one of these decks that you're definitely gonna see during the KCC, a deck that still requires a high ceiling, so you might walk away with an easy W and think, wow, this deck was cheeks! But no, it turned out the player playing it just has no idea what they're doing. And they're just clicking yes on cards. Oh, let me set Harpora turn 1 after I've pitched Orcust Nightmare to my graveyard. Haha! I am such a genius player. That's what they do, the really bad Orcust players. And the really good Orcust players just win the game, because this is a really potent engine. Speaking of Orcust Gandora? I don't know where I put it. I put it under regular Orcust. I think it's like the most popular variant, and probably the only variant that you're still playing if you're playing Orcust. Not named Allies, I guess. And it is like more consistent than the regular Orcust, because you're able to consistently set up GGX turn 1, get the Harpora, use the scale, pitch the Harpora, and go into full Orcust combo that ends on Decode Talker, then Girsu, and Babel every time. But at the same time, you're doing the same things every time, and eventually your opponents are going to be able to be like, yeah, I just know how to counter this bot. It's so easy. It's like this deck, it's still good, but it doesn't feel as fluid as the regular Orcust does. I don't know if I'm making any sense. I'm just going to move on to Resonators. Resonators? Put right over there. It's one of these combo decks that takes a long time to make their turn. But once they set up, they're really difficult to get off the field. Especially if you're playing one of these weaker decks out there that just falls to Crimson Rain. Also a fan favorite, so you can expect it to show up a lot. It's a pretty good deck. And that's it, that's all I have to say about it. The weakness of this deck is obviously it's a combo deck with clearly known choke points at this stage. Like, people are gonna know how to play about fucking Resonators. These have been around for a long time now. Rokkets! Pretty insane deck. Pretty insane deck. Able to consistently get 3 monsters worth of disruption, or back row if they don't draw enough monsters. But you know, it's still like 3, let's say 3 disruption on average, right? You got the Void Ogre Dragon, you got the Draco Berserker, the Tenyi now that was added recently. That's a huge boon for the deck. You got Evil Storm Nightmare, you got the Bullet Furious Dragon, you got your back row that you can afford to play a ton of because the skill is completely bonkers. It's definitely one of the best decks out there. The one thing keeping it from being tier 1 is the presence of a garnet called Boot Sector Launch, that even if you're playing 20 cards, has a 50% chance of showing up in your opening hand. Salamangreat. Salamangreat is like right there. Cope about it. It's not really an impressive deck anymore. It's like, wow, I can generate bunch of advantage. It's like Orcust and Rokkets staring at it like, yeah, but we can also win through combat. Salamangreat is like, well, My combos are really consistent because of all the starters that I have. And once again, Orcust, Rokkets, Destiny Hero, Oda is looking at it like, yeah, what about it? Someone goes like, oh, well, I Agnimizard. I was like, oh yeah, I guess you got Agnimizard, and that's all the thing, the deck as going for it, right? You can play Kurikara and recycle it, that's cool. You can play Agni, wow. You can play Gizmic Kaku, and that's how much Copion we have to inject in our veins to believe that salamangreat is anything other than a rogue tier deck. It's probably still gonna show up in the top 100 though. Tenyi! Tenyi is one of these newest decks that I'm not sure where to place, because we're not sure what the power level is. I want to put it there, but I also want to put it there. And they have more decks there than there, so I'm going to put it there. Ah, fuck it, this feels really bad. We're going to get yelled at. No, Tenyi is a really strong deck. Its ability to like place through so many disruption, going second, and then an OTK, is just insane, Nobody has settled on the ultimate, like, optimal build for the deck yet. I'm sure that's gonna change after this KC Cup. Toons! Fuck Toons. I wanna put him here, you know? Because fuck him. It's the high end of tier 3. It's a deck that sets a card that says your cards can't be targeted or destroyed, and then it summons a bunch of big beaters that can attack directly and have protection and other effects. And you also have really potent back row and snatch steal for some reason. So it's definitely going to be one of these decks that win fast, clears the KCC in a matter of like seconds. But also a deck with a gigantic target in the field zone, right? It's like, I'm just gonna cosmic your fucking thing, and now you're gonna have to pay 1,000 to be able to do anything with this shit deck. It's a really strong, consistent, perfectly okay aggro deck to climb with, but at the higher echelons, you're gonna run into people that are prepared, and they're gonna smack you. I also think like Turnwell is gonna get an emergency nerf. The reason I'm saying this is I think that the idea of playing Toon World alongside 3 bookmarks, 3 comic hands, just to be able to snatch steal an opponent's monster, just to have a non-limited 3 mind control, is absolutely insane and alluring to many decks, like not Crusadia, Mech Knight's already playing Toon World, because it's a 3 card to set up in a column. You can also play it maybe in Orcust, maybe you see an Orcust Toon variant where you just play comic hand in order to facilitate your Orcust combos. Toon World's probably not long for this world. Trickstars! Trickstar feels like it goes right here. It's a really consistent deck. It's a deck that does one thing really well. What Trickstars do is basically they start the duel with 6,000 life points. A couple of like back row set because they drew deep into their deck. They have Harnessed in hand. They have a way to protect their Candina, thanks to Lycoris. And they just say R2 and they go ahead. But it's also a deck that kind of struggles going second because back row decks are so really good right now, and Disruption is ever present. Candina has a huge target on its back. Light Stage has a huge target on its back. It is pretty good at snatching up wins, and it's one of these decks that's going to be able to help you rank up quickly, but you're gonna have a really bad time against probably all of these. It's still a cool deck though. Ursarctics! I'm gonna put Ursarctics right here. It's another one of these decks that is very skill intensive, that has very long turns, that aims to set up some really cool disruption, and that falls apart if you don't get to open Radiation or if your field spell is taken care of. And last but not least, Utopia. People are gonna say that I'm coping. I'm gonna put Utopia there, right? It's the scale that says you just get to set up Utopia ultimately or Ray for free, and this simply cannot be ignored. It's just too tempting, too alluring to not. I think this is one of these decks that's going to be the surprise runner-up of like the KCC. Oh, BG! I can't believe I completely forgot to talk about BLS. This should have been a 20th deck, not a Statics. BLS is tier 2. Thank you for watching the video. Anyway, that's my tier list. It's probably garbage, not worth anything. Let me know what you thought about it. Let me know which decks you plan on playing. in the KC Cup. Make sure to write a long comment about why you should have included your favorite pet deck, like Dark Magician. It's gonna be Dark Magician most exclusively. Nobody else is gonna complain that their deck is in there. Thank you for watching. Take care, everyone. And I'll see you guys and gals and non-binary pals next time.